So it turns out that the suitable person for the main OS is JAO. However, this person always maintains a cold and indifferent demeanor, showing no emotions, making others uncomfortable. When he arrives at OS, he pulls the little boy in front of him and introduces JAO, hoping that he can teach the kid martial arts. The expression on JAO's face reveals a bit of confusion, while the little boy looks at him innocently. Finally, the young man decides and, with a sigh, declines the request. This surprises OS, and she questions why. CHUO, standing beside her, is equally puzzled. She tries to explain that the young man is a younger brother of humble origin, inviting the gentleman to teach him. However, it doesn't seem appropriate. The disappointment is evident in the young boy's eyes, almost on the verge of tears. JAO notices the expression and explains that it's not for the reasons assumed. Before the astonishment of OS, he takes her hand and leads her away, apologizing for any rudeness. As they leave, CHUO is left confused, shouting loudly at the gentleman's intentions. Once away, OS questions him about the purpose of taking her brother. JAO dismissively throws her hand away and interrogates if the child is just a new toy for the young miss. OS, with suspicion in her eyes, wonders why he is asking such a thing, feeling bewildered. In the midst of it, JAO reveals his past, how his family fell from grace, and he was forced to become a knight for the young miss. OS recalls the mistreatment he endured, dressing him as a woman when in a good mood and letting others mock him when not. She starts to understand the reasons for his reluctance. Despite being a knight, JAO's sword is not for protecting his mistress, but for resisting the constant attacks from other knights. OS realizes that JAO's facial injuries from before were likely caused by those knights. JAO questions her attitude, accusing her of mockery and humiliation, leading to a confrontation. The situation escalates, and JAO draws his sword, but surprisingly, instead of attacking, he throws it to the ground. OS is bewildered, unable to comprehend why JAO would abandon his sword, considering it a knight's lifeblood. JAO explains that if it's not for protection, then why does the young man want her brother to follow him? OS realizes that she has neglected the well-being of JAO, and he decides to step back, leaving her in confusion. As JAO leaves, OS is left feeling remorseful and wanting to explain everything to him. Despite knowing the plot, OS is determined to protect the young wild child. She decides to act secretly, so OS reluctantly finds a reason to go for a walk, intending to cut ties with CHUO. CHUO remained very worried. "Young miss, do you really need me to come along?" However, OS had already made up her mind. She would complete this task on her own. As she walked through the crowded shopping street, the young lady of the Fu Baituk mansion had her eyes fixed on the various swords in the store. However, she couldn't make sense of the multitude of sword types, and they all seemed similar. She sighed deeply, feeling overwhelmed. This is not good. It seems I understand how boys feel when choosing lipstick for their girlfriends. Choosing a sword is not like picking a dress. As she stood leaning her face against the store window, the shop owner warmly welcomed her inside. Entering the shop, OS marveled at the diverse styles. As she stepped in, she was astonished by the variety, making it even more challenging to choose. Feeling lost, she decided to follow the strategy of choosing the most expensive one, thinking that the highest price must mean the best quality. The shop owner, trying to deceive her, showed a collection of seemingly precious swords. Each one was priced at 1,000 gold pieces. However, the swords were covered in dust and clearly neglected. OS, unimpressed, asked if these swords were old and worn out. The shop owner continued with false tales, claiming their ancient origins and special powers. Undeterred, OS inquired about the most expensive sword in the shop. The shop owner enthusiastically showcased a pile of seemingly valuable swords. OS, pretending to be interested, felt annoyed by the obvious deception, but decided to play along. Before leaving, OS mockingly teased the shop owner for his ridiculous stories, making him flustered. As she turned away, ready to leave, she unexpectedly bumped into the blonde young man from earlier. Realizing she was about to be deceived, OS burst into laughter, declaring the shop owner as a trickster. While making her way through the crowded street, OS suddenly stopped. To her surprise, she came face to face with a mysterious sword that emitted a dark and ominous aura. Her whole body stiffened, recalling the memory of the sword that had killed the protagonist in the novel. The sword seemed to have an eerie power, and she couldn't move. The blonde young man, puzzled by her sudden halt, tried to make conversation. OS, however, was absorbed in her thoughts, realizing that this might be the cursed sword from the novel that had taken the life of the original owner. The young man immediately rushed over to support her, constantly reassuring her. OS regained her composure, took a deep breath, and waited until she was securely in the young man's arms to calm down. However, the body suddenly felt uncomfortable, realizing her somewhat disadvantaged position. Recognizing her own vulnerability, OS instinctively withdrew, while the concerned young man continued to offer assistance, suggesting, "How about I take you home?" As they were about to leave, OS couldn't help but cast a lingering glance back at the mysterious sword. Quietly contemplating, she thought about the sword. It was the destined encounter for the male protagonist in the novel, and also the ultimate fate of the original owner. If she had encountered it before the male protagonist, she resolved to turn it into her own destiny. OS immediately turned back to inquire about the sword from the vendor. Strangely, the seller remained indifferent, only observing her for a while before explaining that the sword would choose its owner, and she might not be suitable. Before he could finish, a clinking sound interrupted, as coins clashed together to create a dazzling sound. Collecting all the money she had, OS confidently presented it to the vendor, stating, "Now, sir, do you think I'm suitable? Anything unattainable with money can be achieved with a lot of money. This is a demonstration of that." The old man, who was arrogant moments ago, now had a glint in his eyes as he accepted the money. The young man with blonde hair approached, expressing his concerns about the sword having heavy rust and not being worth buying. Disregarding his advice, OS, holding the sword, and the old man completed the transaction, and the vendor, now excited, swiftly packed up and disappeared. With only the sword in her eyes, OS kept caressing it and thanked the young man for his suggestion. Despite his advice against the purchase, she was captivated by the sword. The young man was left speechless by the naive young lady. Unexpectedly, she noticed something and turned a suspicious gaze towards the blonde-haired young man who had just called her OS. He explained that he had met her at Kal's banquet, referring to a previous chaotic incident. This reason seemed plausible enough for OS to nod in agreement. Even though they had encountered each other a few times, she had yet to discover that the young man was an AI. Eagerly, she asked for his name, and he officially introduced himself as OS. Following her habit, she extended her hand for a handshake, but to her surprise, he thought she wanted him to kiss her hand. Awkwardly going along with it, OS retracted her hand nervously. The man introduced himself as DOCINAT, and OS involuntarily delved into the storyline to find more about this character. She couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as she thought about him. Just as she pondered on this, there was a knock on the door, distracting her thoughts. The person entering was THOO, who was attentively cleaning the sword, the spoils of war that OS brought back. In no time, the sword sparkled like a mirror. Curious, OS asked, "What are you doing, CHUO?" CHUO earnestly raised the sword and explained, "Miss, this sword is rusty and dull. I've been trying to clean it with a cloth, but it seems unusable now. Even as a decorative item, it doesn't look appealing." Oyef responded briefly, saying, "That's because the sword hasn't awakened yet." Seeing Khuong's confusion, she enthusiastically revealed that the sword had consciousness and became old and worn due to losing its owner. She compared it to an old dragon in a deep sleep, and by embedding a magic gem into the sword, its magic power would awaken, emitting a brilliant light. However, Khuong expressed concern, wondering if it was a bribe to enchant the sword. Oyef admitted that he wasn't entirely wrong and explained that it was a common method for ordinary people to perceive magical swords. She also mentioned how destined, the male protagonist, would effortlessly make the sword acknowledge him by standing still, causing it to reflect his aura. Reflecting on the differences between individuals, Oyef couldn't help but think about the peculiar preferences of the sword towards destined. Despite not having eyes, the sword seemed drawn to him. Oyef sighed, realizing the vast differences between characters in the novel. Meanwhile, Jao arrived and Oyef, still in high spirits, mentioned their need for a convenient outfit for tomorrow's mission. She briefed him on the situation with the Elion Empire spies who had fallen into the trap set by the prince. The prince, impressed by Oyef's suggestion, praised her for changing the tactics, preventing a potential failure. The next morning they set off, and this time Oyef wasn't alone. Jao accompanied her to dismantle the traps. Jao's expression remained disdainful, while Oyef appeared in unusual attire, wearing a comfortable pink outfit. The carriage stopped in a secluded area, and as usual, Jao announced, "The young miss has arrived at the recruiting valley." Oyef gracefully stepped out of the carriage, adjusting her flowing hair. Surveying the surroundings of the recruitment valley, she noticed various oddities described in the novel, which seemed ordinary. Excitedly, she strapped on her sword and reminded Jao to follow her up the mountain. As Jao observed Oyef's enthusiastic figure moving forward, a hint of coldness crept into his eyes. He began recalling the horrifying memories from before. At that time, Oyef arrogantly looked down on him and challenged him to compete with her hunting dog, a menacing creature with red eyes that suddenly appeared. Confused about why the young miss would ask him to do such a pointless task, he, with his capabilities, could easily defeat the ferocious hunting dog. He just needed to take a few steps and use his authority. However, Oyef unexpectedly changed her expression to a cold tone, questioning whether he dared to kill her hunting dog. Suddenly, the malicious look on her face transformed into a twisted, perverted smile. She cruelly stepped on Jao and forced him to replace her dog. As he contemplated the pain and humiliation he would endure, a surge of determination flowed through him. He wondered if he could eliminate her completely by killing her and then lie, claiming that a monster attacked them. Thinking about it, he swiftly drew his sword, aiming it towards Oyef. The situation seemed dire for her, and she prepared herself for the worst. Just as she turned to face him, Jao's sword swiftly approached. It sliced through her hair, and she gasped, fearing the inevitable. However, upon looking down, she noticed a snake beneath her feet, now severed by Jao's sword. The sword was swiftly sheathed, and the imminent threat to Oyef had been narrowly averted. The cold-hearted young man explained, "Just now, a snake fell from above onto her head, so I quickly dealt with it. I spoke without blinking, falsely claiming that I saved her, making the snake, still struggling, want to crawl away in shame. Clearly, she thought I attacked her from the tree. Hearing this, she sighed in relief, thanking me. She almost thought I wanted to kill her. I coldly retrieved my sword to protect her, stating, it was not my intention, just fulfilling a duty. In reality, deep down, I had long wanted to end her life. If it weren't for my night spirit forbidding me from killing my master, the one lying under my sword is not just a snake, but looking towards the young lady, I silently resolved to wait for the restoration of our family and relieve myself of the role of a knight. That moment would be her death. Of course, the dark thoughts in the heart of the cold-hearted young man were unknown to her. While she was busy studying the map, she turned to ask him, "There seems to be no path on this map. Do you know which way to go?" Before the Dao could finish listening to the question, he promptly responded, "I don't know. Carrying this name is as good as useless." Unbeknownst to him, Oyef miscalculated. Following the principle that attaching a magic-infused gem would awaken the magic sword, they headed towards Mount Longshan. It was a favorite destination for adventurers, producing various magic-infused gems within the bodies of creatures there. If the luck was good, entering the mountain could change one's life. Boaz's purpose for this journey was to find a high-level magic gem to awaken the magic sword. After looking at the map for a while, she cheerfully announced, "I know where to go. Let's head to the right." Her unusually knowledgeable attitude made Dao suspicious, but unexpectedly, she was just making educated guesses. Pointing at the left path, she confidently said, "The left path looks smoother and is frequently traveled. If I'm not mistaken, it can lead directly to Mount Longshan." Hearing this, the confusion increased. Why did she choose the right path then? Oyef, with a confident expression, declared, "There are already too many adventurers and mountains. If I were a creature, I'd definitely stay away from crowded places. So if we want to find a high-level creature, we must go in the opposite direction, towards desolate areas. But that kind of atmosphere can only be maintained for half a day." Before Oil could react, she sighed heavily, realizing, "I truly can't walk any further." The Dao took a rest, but the knight remained vigorous. Teasingly, he said, "You pledged to overcome mountains and seas to hunt high-level creatures, and now you can't even take a few steps. How embarrassing." Feeling ashamed, she sat down muttering, "I really can't go on anymore." The Dao, still not comprehending, watched her pull out a cake she had brought along. Curious, he asked if she intended to wait for rabbits with it. She, without clarifying her intentions, raised a piece of cake and asked, "Should we wait for rabbits with this?" Not understanding her plan, he observed as she held up a cake bag and continued, "With only this much food left, who knows what kind of trick you're planning?" Certainly puzzled, he kept questioning, and she was determined to proceed with her idea. Oyef, engrossed in creating a trap, believed that as dusk approached, it would be the hunting time for creatures. She anticipated that they would be lured by the food she brought. Once a creature fell into the trap, he would immediately draw his sword. Aware that, as a subordinate, he had no choice but to follow orders, he displayed a face of disbelief, while the sky was gradually darkening. Oyef worried that if they didn't leave before dark, it would be dangerous. Yet she couldn't bring herself to give up. Is it possible that she must abandon her mission midway? If there is no way to awaken the magic sword, she feared that one day she might fall prey to a creature in the mountains. The principal suggested a tragic outcome just by thinking about it. Living through death once again was not an easy thing. The harem of handsome men had not yet been opened, and she couldn't bear to carry this hatred down. Home Chine became confused. In a desperate attempt, Oyef came up with a new plan. She pulled out her clothes and inquired, "Should we hug a tree and wait for rabbits?" Dao still didn't understand her intentions, so she raised a bag of cakes, asking, "Is this enough?" Unsure of her book strategy, he continued to ask questions. She was determined to execute her plan. At this point, Oyef had finished setting up the trap, thinking that it was almost time for the creatures hunting. Perhaps they would be drawn to the scent of the food she brought. Afterward, they could quietly plot and catch the creatures in the trap. All he needed to do was act when a creature fell into the trap. As if on cue, a creature immediately sensed the delicious aroma and flapped its wings, flying toward the scent. Soon, the creature arrived where the two were hiding. Boaz and Jao were already waiting there. Seeing the prey approaching, OS eagerly tugged on JAO's clothes, and he, with a face full of disdain, held his sword, ready to strike. A series of movements signaled that JAO was about to pounce. OS, sitting below, cheered enthusiastically. Without uttering a word, he observed the hand, gripping his clothes with a look of disgust. There was a rustling sound, revealing that JAO was preparing to charge. OS, not wanting to miss out on the action, cheered loudly from below. He quickly leaped forward, calmly swinging his sword backward, and then thrusting it straight into the creature's vital area. The creature screamed in pain, releasing a shiny blue stone. Unyielding, the Tao refused to let it go. The man directly thrust another sword, causing the creature to collapse, unconscious. With the human resource issue resolved, the man confidently sheathed his sword, displaying a triumphant demeanor. At this point, OS, exhilarated, ran towards him, intending to high-five him. "We did it. We got the magic gem. You're so strong. The mightiest knight in the Empire," OS exclaimed, full of admiration. The man blushed, not expecting such praise. OS continued, "And you too are strong. If we rank by the flexibility of the beak, you're second, and no one can deny it. Except for Sunday." Someone praised, and though he tried to maintain a cool demeanor, the man's face had already turned red. OS kept encouraging and clapping, urging everyone to join in. However, in her excitement, OS forgot one detail. The man didn't like physical contact. She withdrew her hand, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I forgot. You don't like me touching you." "Sorry." She apologized repeatedly. This unexpected change left JAO in awe. He hadn't expected the haughty Miss OS to apologize. Indeed, she seemed to have changed. While they were still celebrating their victory against the monster, another mysterious figure approached. This person was flamboyant, clapping hands to encourage. With a light tone, he praised the camaraderie between the master and servant, finding it deeply moving. Hearing the commotion, OS turned around to see the stranger. He had a peculiar appearance that made it seem like he had come from Bin Duong. Still, he continued to mock the man who had just praised them, accusing him of being a thief. OS, unafraid, stated that they didn't steal the gem, but acquired it after defeating the demonic dragon. Oil, who had regained consciousness, corroborated her story. The dragon seemed unbothered and flew towards the mysterious man. The mysterious man, treating the dragon as his pet, affectionately patted its head, creating an impression that they had known each other for a long time. He then directed his attention towards OS, demanding the return of the magic gem. OS, however, insisted that they had rightfully earned it by defeating the dragon. The mysterious man, with a condescending tone, claimed ownership of the entire Mount Longshan and everything in it, emphasizing that no one had the right to take anything. OS, still determined, proposed a compromise. They would return the gem if he released JAO. Unexpectedly, the mysterious man seemed acquainted with the dragon and released JAO. The dragon, under the man's control, showcased a unique connection between them. Then he stared at OS, stating that she lacked the qualifications to negotiate with him, given her current vulnerable state. OS, in a difficult situation, tried to negotiate despite her predicament. Finally, she had to assume the identity of the granddaughter of Mr. Churro to save her father. "I am Duke Vi. Even if you let us go, I will give you all the gold, silver, and treasures." But what about someone who owns this entire mountain like him, still interested in the cheap jewelry of the Duke's house? The mysterious man nonchalantly looked at her and said, "I originally don't care about unrelated things, and he knows well how to mock others." Pointing directly at OS, he continued, "I find you interesting. Why don't you stay? In return, your servant will be released." Hearing this, Young immediately shouted, "OS, Don't listen to him. I don't need your help. Ignoring Jao's direct reaction, the mysterious man became angry. His eyes were cold, and he spoke, "Look at your servant, not even grateful to you. I will help you discipline him." As soon as he finished speaking, he chuckled, raised his hand, and in a flash, the branches of the trees began to wrap around Jao's neck, making it hard for him to breathe. Helplessly, Jao could only weakly resist. Witnessing this, Oyef was terrified and pleaded with the mysterious man not to hurt him. In her heart, Oyef silently blamed herself, regretting her stubbornness in insisting on going to Long Time Mountain to find the magic stone, which led to Jao's involvement. Determined to save him at all costs, Oyef desperately pleaded with the mysterious man, who seemed pleased with her eagerness and agreed. The branches loosened around Jao, and the mysterious man, with a mysterious smile, declared, "I will count to 3, and both of you have to say whether you want him to stay or leave." Before he could finish the countdown, both Oyef and Jao shouted in unison, "I want him to stay." Witnessing this sacrifice for each other, the muscular man with six-pack abs burst into laughter. He remarked on their telepathic connection and asked if they were spiritually connected. Boaz and Jao, intrigued, questioned each other's reasons for choosing to stay. In the end, the mysterious man, satisfied with their decision, announced that both had to stay, as per the agreed conditions. Boaz immediately stood in front of Jao, ready to protect him. The mysterious man teased them about their sacrificial act, and Oyef, losing patience, expressed her displeasure towards the noble class and questioned the discrimination between nobles and servants. This made Jao, observing her, more intrigued and confused. The mysterious man, amused, mentioned his curiosity about their small noble family and asked if Jao was Oyef's lover. The revelation left both of them flabbergasted, and the muscular man, finding their reactions amusing, decided not to torment them further. With a snap of his fingers, the branches released Jao, revealing his heavily injured body. Oyef widened her eyes, suspicion inked all over her face. She asked once again, "Is it true that you're letting us go?" The young man raised an eyebrow, countering, "Want to stay for dinner?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ghostly creature next to them began growling menacingly, making Oyef freeze in place. She remembered the saying, "In the 36 strategies, fleeing is the best." Now that he had opened the way, why wouldn't he run? They might become grilled meat tonight and end up in the belly of that terrifying creature. Oyef, in a flash of inspiration, swiftly grabbed the young man's wrist, causing his entire body to stiffen as if electrocuted. Before he could recover, she pulled him along with her, urging him to run. As they ran, she couldn't help but remind him, "If you don't hurry, we'll become grilled meat now." Before leaving, she stole a glance at the mysterious man once again. Suddenly, the mysterious man opened his mouth to convey a cryptic message. The truth is about to cut across the night sky and turn into a sword of judgment. The enigmatic words left Oyef even more perplexed, her head filled with question marks. What did those two sentences mean? The night sky covered the noble mansion, overlooking the gathering of magical stones and creatures they had collected that day. Boaz couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. She wondered whether the man knew she wasn't the real Oyef, capable of taming powerful beasts and making prophecies. In novels, only those suitable for the setting knew the truth, and they were the all-powerful sorcerers throughout the 6 realms. Interrupting her thoughts, Chu's call sliced through her contemplation. She announced that the mistress was looking for Oyef. Quickly pushing open the heavy wooden door, Oyef entered the ceremonial hall with her father. However, her father seemed not to notice her. He spoke to the mysterious man instead, introducing her as his daughter and asking to present the esteemed guest. Oyef looked at the guest with surprise, but something about his face seemed strangely familiar. The guest was Kayulen, the mysterious man she had encountered on the mountain. Inwardly, OS screamed in fear, wondering why he was here. Khuong seemed prepared to meet her again. He looked at her with interest. The noble, curious about the connection between them, inquired if he knew his daughter. Without caring about her father's questions, Khuong answered directly, stating they had a previous acquaintance. The unexpected reunion left OS flabbergasted. She recalled the threat from earlier in the day and wondered if Khuong was here to carry out his intentions. However, the shocking news from her father that Khuong, the royal prophet, would stay in their mansion for a while, caught her off guard. Trying to process the situation, OS stared in disbelief at her father, who instructed her to treat Khuong well. OS, internally screaming, couldn't fathom why Khuong, who had threatened her life just that morning, would now reside under the same roof. While she was still trying to absorb the information, her father scolded her for rude behavior and reminded her of her mother receiving the favor of Khuong before her death. Khuong, increasingly gaining the upper hand, winked at OS with a mischievous smile. Confirming his stay, he announced that he had a specific purpose for coming, leaving OS to wonder if it was something related to her mother's last breath. OS, feeling trapped and uncomfortable, couldn't ignore the fact that she might have to live with this extraordinary and dangerous man. Suppressing her internal turmoil, she sternly faced him and accused her father of not being aware of the true nature of Khuong. Despite her criticism, the mysterious man, unfazed, continued to tease OS. Ignoring her warnings, he playfully blinked at her, leaving OS to dread what might unfold with him living under the same roof. Indeed, these direct words have subtly manipulated OS emotions as she silently recalls the content of the novel. OS is a premature child. Her mother passed away immediately after giving birth to her. This fact only fuels her curiosity even more. She wonders about the last wishes her original owner's mother entrusted before her demise. Seeing OS's ambivalent expression, the man shrugs and decides to give up. It seems like she genuinely doesn't want to know. How can he decipher just half of it and then stop abruptly? OS raises their hand to stop him and says, "Wait, I'm still listening." However, this guy is quite cunning. He pretends to resist, contemplating. Now, what shall I do? I don't want to tell her anymore. The more he looks at OS, the more irritated he becomes. Her entire body trembles with anger at this outburst. The despicable guy doesn't care about her feelings and continues to act indifferent. But I live here to fulfill my mother's final wish. The last wish depends on how she behaves in the future. I will decide whether to tell her or not. The flames of hatred have completely ignited within her, and her inner thoughts are only cursing the guy who seems to have vanished without a trace. She can't help but stare at him with a look of deep affection. The Lord is standing in the middle, unsure of how to intervene. Clearing his throat to gain attention, he carefully reminds her to calm down. The prince is about to return after winning against the Jian Empire. The father will be in charge of commemorating OS, and she must establish a relationship with Khuong. However, OS is completely focused on her father's first question, eagerly asking, did the crown prince win the battle? Upon hearing the response, the Lord is extremely pleased, smiling as he recounts the victory. Indeed, the crown prince has captured the enemy emperor, successfully suppressing the border conflict and wiping out the enemy forces. In less than 10 days, the crown prince will return to the capital. The AI seems ecstatic, reveling in the joy of the crown prince's victory. If the prince wins the battle, it means the plot has changed. Therefore, in the future, OS might be able to change her fate and avoid death. The more she thinks about it, the more elated she feels. A few days later, OS is leisurely enjoying tea in a corner of the garden. Simultaneously, Khuong leads JAO according to her instructions. Observing her dissatisfied expression, the curious guy asks if it's training time. "Miss, did you call me urgently?" The OS gently places the teacup down and says, "I embedded a demon stone from Long Time Mountain into the sword. Come and take a look." Saying this, she points towards the dazzling sword box. Seeing this, the curious one couldn't resist commenting, "This sword looks much sharper now." OS laughs happily. "Of course, this is a high-grade demon stone." She delicately lifts the sword from the box, then advances towards Gao. "From now on, this sword will be yours." In her heart, she had already planned to give this sword to Gao, as long as it doesn't fall into Dian's hands. She no longer worries about the male lead decapitating her. Suddenly asking again, "Are you planning to give me this sword?" Seeing his hesitation, OS smiles, explaining, "It's not the sword that you broke before, so it's time for you to receive a new one." Due to his lingering suspicion, he asks, "Why are you giving it to me suddenly?" Deep inside, he is in turmoil. What is the intention of this woman? If not, why is she treating him like this? Boaz looks at him seriously, both hands holding the sword towards him. "You are the knight responsible for protecting me. Don't you need a new sword? I know that I've been excessive before, and I don't expect you to change your impression of me later. But I swear I will respect you in the future. I will wait until you truly acknowledge me and willingly become my knight." The guy holding the sword is completely confused. He still can't accept this truth. Without waiting for Jao to say more, OS continues to express herself. "Make sure you accept this sword. It has been prepared for you from the beginning." Holding the sword, he hesitates, visibly struggling. His trembling hands move towards her. The sword in OS' hands keeps rising in the air, hesitating. After a while, he finally lays his hands on the sword. He doesn't dare to look directly into her eyes and turns away. "I hope these words today are not just to tease me. I will come back to see you." After saying this, he quickly turns away, as if escaping. Seeing Jao's awkward demeanor, OS can't help but burst into laughter. It seems even the little wolf has shy moments like this. Sooner or later, one day, she will tame him. Suddenly, Human appears out of nowhere like a ghost, asking the guy why she gave him the sword. The guy is intrigued. "Why did you give me the sword?" OS turns back startled. Without any warning, Kiyuan stood right behind her, and he seemed to have been there for a while. He looked at her with great interest. Ideally, she should have guarded herself more carefully. The sudden appearance startled her. This man seemed to have a mysterious air around him, and sooner or later, she would fall victim to his threatening presence. She turned away and replied in a calm voice, "There's no need to tell you anything." However, the man didn't give up. He whispered into her ear, and even though the magical sword had changed owners, it still harbored danger in the hands of others. She feared that sooner or later, it would lead to her blood being spilled. His words echoed in her ears, leaving her frozen in place with fear. She hesitated, rejecting him with a stammering denial. "I don't know what you're talking about. Stay away from me." She quickly moved away from the dangerous man. Before leaving, she couldn't resist taunting him a bit. "Remember, you're in my house." Unexpectedly, he seemed embarrassed, but he continued to laugh, looking at her without stopping. She wondered what had made her so angry. It wasn't impossible. She didn't mind marrying him. She immediately denied with disdain. "I don't have to marry you," she retorted, and without looking back, she ran away from this dangerous man, not wanting to stay with him for another second. Before leaving, she couldn't help but add a few more words to provoke him, calling him a homeless person and reminding him that he was in her house. To her surprise, he looked as if his nerves were cut off, embarrassed. He just laughed and looked at her, making her stiff in place. His words seemed to pierce her ears, making her fear that it wouldn't end well. She ran away in fear, refusing to be near him. Kiyuan continued to smile and watched her leave. Unexpectedly, As soon as she disappeared from view, he immediately retracted his smile, and his mouth continued to make judgments. The petite and cheerful girl was not afraid of the magical sword, but she was afraid of being seen through by him. He recalled the figure of that girl, and there was something extremely strange about it. He couldn't foresee her future, which was peculiar. A new day began, and the birds chirped on the tree branches. At this moment, she was still preparing in front of the mirror. She adorned herself with heavy and elaborate jewelry, then looked at herself in the mirror with satisfaction. Turning to Chuo with a triumphant look, she asked, "What do you think of my outfit today? Doesn't it make me look like a charming Batwoman?" Chuo stood there wide-eyed, gazing at the true beauty of the young lady. However, Oyef still felt uneasy. She stood with her chin on her hand, thinking for a while. However, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing. Seeing her in this state, Chuo, feeling a bit hesitant, asked, "Does Miss want to change into another outfit?" Suddenly, at this moment, Oyef stared at Chuo intently for a long time, looking up and then down. Then she suddenly thought of something, and that was it. She excitedly pulled Chuo along, saying, "Let's go." It turned out that she had taken Chuo shopping. However, it was not Oyef trying on the clothes. It was her maid, Chuo. She walked out in a dress entirely different from her usual maid uniform. Chuo, however, still felt very awkward. "Miss looks so elegant. How can I, a maid, wear such luxurious clothes? They're too expensive." Oyef smirked, indicating no. Every girl should dress up a bit. Moreover, when we participate in the victory celebration, my maid should not dress normally. If you look good, then there's no reason for my servant to dress casually. "This color really suits you," Chuo said, complimenting her. Chuo thanked her, but she still looked reluctant. "I'm just a maid. How can I wear such luxurious clothes? It's too extravagant." Oyef pouted, signaling that it's fine. Every girl should dress up a bit. Besides, when we attend the victory celebration, my maid should not dress casually. If you don't look good, then my face will be affected too. Hearing this, Chuo reluctantly agreed to wear this outfit. If it weren't for the young lady, she wouldn't dare to wear such an extravagant dress. At this point, the atmosphere of the celebration was lively, and the streets were crowded like a festival. Indeed, it was a real festival. Everyone seemed to be very happy, celebrating the victory. The air was filled with excitement. In the crowded streets, Oyef suddenly felt a warm presence behind her, as if someone's eyes were staring at her. She quickly turned to investigate, and immediately her back was pushed forward by a strong force. She couldn't resist it. The people around her took control of her. Worried, she turned to look at Chuo, intending to remind her to be careful not to get lost. Unexpectedly, when she turned back, she couldn't find the two sisters anywhere. At this moment, she realized the painful truth. "I'm lost." With a shocked expression, she realized that Kali had witnessed her moment of vulnerability. The girl was furious and thought, "I didn't expect this woman to be so bold when facing me. She acts as if we are equals. She even dares to play tricks on my sister." Now, the most anticipated scene for fangirls had arrived. The appearance of the group of knightly handsome men, led by the cold-faced Dienanan, sitting on a majestic horse. Amidst the enthusiastic cheers, they announced the arrival of the prince. He looked around, and for Oyef, it seemed boring and monotonous. It's best to find Chuo and the others, she thought. So she was forced through the crowd, and just to admire the handsome prince, Oyef turned away and left. However, the sudden turmoil erupted. The girls were pushing and shoving, and even standing still became a challenge. The girls seemed to deliberately want to crush him. Alone, Jao lost his balance and tilted towards Keyuan. The two were almost about to embrace each other, and their eyes met with embarrassment. Outside observers might think they were a couple. Startled by the incident, they separated from each other. The heavy atmosphere enveloped them, making everyone breathless with embarrassment. The girls, disappointed by the lack of romantic scenes, searched for the prince and the handsome knight. Chao and Kuen, feeling uneasy, tried to get out of the crowd. The situation was not better for them, as the girls were like intentionally wanting to squeeze them. The girls acted as if trying to get close to him would make them happy, with no regard for the discomfort they caused. Chao lost his balance and leaned towards Kuen. At this moment, the two almost hugged each other, and their eyes met with embarrassment. Observers might think they were a couple. Shocked by the incident, they quickly separated. The heavy atmosphere surrounded them, making everyone feel embarrassed. The girls, disappointed by the lack of Oyef, sincerely thanked him, unaware that this person was harboring sinister intentions. The man maintained a friendly facade, extending his hand in invitation. If the young lady truly wanted to express her gratitude, he wondered if she had time to take a stroll with him. Apologizing for the earlier misunderstanding and expressing concern about their separation, he continued with a fake smile, inviting her to join him. However, underneath his seemingly friendly demeanor, he was concealing a devious plot that had failed to ensnare its target. If the hidden agenda behind the nonchalant act could be exposed, the main antagonist was sure to face consequences sooner or later. To ensure the safety of everyone involved, a delicate balance had to be maintained, and Oyef was forced to keep a distance. While acting as if nothing happened, the man continued his relentless pursuit, leaving Oyef with limited options. The situation was becoming increasingly complex, and the man's acting skills were impressive. If Oyef were to return to modern times, she could easily become a lead actress. As the man persisted, Oyef feigned shock and covered her mouth with her hand, questioning how he could inconvenience her in such a way. However, internally, she wished for him to disappear to relieve the annoyance. The man, displaying disappointment, commented on how he thought they were now friends. He speculated that perhaps the young lady disliked him, leading to their distant interactions. Hearing his words and observing his expressions, Oyef found it challenging to resist his relentless advances. Eventually, she reluctantly agreed to accompany him, but before she could finish her sentence, he abruptly took her hand and laughed with a standard, insincere smile. Confirming her agreement, he added a smile that was even more deceitful, making Oyef feel helpless. Encountering this troublesome person today seemed like extremely bad luck. Avoiding him was impossible, and leaving was not an option. Seeing Oyef's stern expression, the man continued his assault confidently, promising to send his guards to find her maids and bring them to her. Oyef, unexpectedly finding herself in this predicament, inwardly sighed at the irony. She couldn't help but admire the antagonist's two-faced nature. He was unstoppable. In response to his actions, Oyef had no choice but to maintain a safe distance, while the man continued his persistent efforts. It appeared that if Oyef didn't agree to go along, the situation would only escalate. The man's determination and acting skills were commendable, making Oyef feel cornered. She reluctantly accepted his proposal, and as they departed, the man continued to wear a genuine-looking, yet utterly fake smile. Back in the royal court, the atmosphere was vibrant, resembling the liveliness of the streets. The emperor expressed immense satisfaction with his son's accomplishments, looking at him with an undisguised smirk. Oyef, hearing about the captured spy, noticed Destined's hesitation when asked about the mastermind. As Destined struggled to speak, Oyef recalled the brutal torture the spy had endured, revealing him as the second prince. Destined hesitated, but eventually claimed that the spy had committed suicide, causing the emperor to drop the subject. The emperor then inquired about the rewards his son desired for this victory. Unable to hold back, the prince remembered his promise to Oyef. The emperor, catching onto his son's thoughts, teased him about his close relationship with the noble lady. The prince, infuriated, rejected the emperor's suggestion, recalling Oyef and the antagonist together. Unable to accept the idea of a woman who claimed to like him but showed affection to another man, he vehemently refused the emperor's proposal, expressing his displeasure. Meanwhile, in a distant place, someone was itching so much that they sneezed repeatedly. Every time Oyef sneezed every 3 seconds, it made the antagonist worry. Concerned, he asked if she was feeling cold. Oyef dismissed it, speculating that there might be an eye speaking ill of her behind her back. As they conversed, they found themselves in a jewelry store where the staff enthusiastically presented various sets of jewelry. Oyef, despite the compliments, waved her hand, indicating her disinterest. However, it turned out that she was brought here under the pretext of helping the antagonist choose a gift. Although Oyef was forced into this situation, she couldn't help but wonder about the recipient of the gift. Could it be Ka? The antagonist, still looking at Oyef with expectation, asked for her opinion on which style was beautiful. Oyef, unimpressed, suggested that Kaliya might prefer something fresh and simple. The antagonist praised her easygoing nature, but Oyef couldn't help but think about Kaliya, wondering if she was the intended recipient. After some contemplation, Oyef pointed to a box and expressed her liking for a particular set, mentioning that it would go well with red hair. The antagonist, slightly surprised by her choice of color, attempted to understand her preferences. Oyef then revealed that she thought the gift was for Kaliya, but the antagonist, still looking at her with anticipation, asked if she could try on the jewelry. Oyef, feeling compelled to assist, agreed reluctantly, realizing that she was now becoming a model. The store staff quickly brought out a variety of jewelry, and Oyef stood still while they adorned her. As the staff worked, the antagonist couldn't help but admire her beauty. Observing her, he couldn't resist the thought that her delicate neck could easily break with a little force. Despite the discomfort, Oyef allowed them to proceed. The staff, with the encouragement of the antagonist, continued to adorn her with various jewelry. Oyef, feeling somewhat overwhelmed, sighed at the inconvenience, but acknowledged that the antagonist had helped her earlier. Once the jewelry was in place, the antagonist expressed his approval, emphasizing Oyef's beauty. However, Oyef remained uncertain whether he was praising her or the jewelry. Suddenly, without warning, the antagonist took Oyef's hand and planted a kiss, leaving her stunned. The antagonist then explained that Oyef was exceptionally beautiful, and her expressions, along with her voice, added to her charm. Oyef was left blushing and overwhelmed by the unexpected situation. The antagonist, with a sly smile, suggested that Kaliya would be lucky to receive such a gift. The staff, sensing the tension, quickly processed the bill and prepared to send the jewelry to the royal court. Oyef, still bewildered by the situation, questioned the antagonist about his sudden decision to give her the gift instead of Kaliya. The antagonist, with a sincere look, admitted that he wanted to pursue her, the noble lady Oyef. Oyef, caught off guard, couldn't comprehend the sudden change. The antagonist, with genuine feelings, expressed his admiration for her, leaving Oyef in a state of confusion. Back in Oyef's residence, Khuong was helping her prepare for the evening. Reflecting on the morning's events, Khuong still felt the lingering fear, but was grateful for the timely intervention of the second prince. However, her attempts to discuss the morning incident were met with Oyef's nonchalant response. As Khuong continued to observe Oyef's distant expression, she couldn't fathom the lack of reaction to her warnings. Oyef, finally realizing Khuong's attempt to communicate, apologized and acknowledged the prince's assistance. The day's events had left Khuong puzzled, trying to understand OS's feelings towards the second prince. Khuong couldn't help but notice OS's distant expression and asked her what was wrong after returning from the anniversary celebration. OS appeared lost in thought, her face displaying a mix of disappointment and exhaustion. Suddenly, she grabbed Khuong's hand, surprising her, and asked a rather unexpected question. OS inquired whether Khuong had ever been confessed to by a boy. Khuong, blushing, was taken aback, emphasizing that such matters were irrelevant as she was still too young. OS, deep in contemplation, seemed to have made a mistake in choosing her confidant. As the conversation unfolded, OS couldn't help but recall the gentle demeanor of the antagonist, especially his sincere eyes and warm hands. She admitted that since receiving the gift, she had been constantly thinking about it. Khuong, interpreting OS's behavior, teasingly suggested that OS might have a secret admirer. OS, feeling conflicted, acknowledged the possibility and began questioning her own feelings. In the meantime, Khuong, using her limited knowledge, decided to analyze the situation. She concluded that OS was deeply in love with the first prince, but both princes seemed interested in her. Khuong turned the complex love triangle into a dramatic tale of love, hatred, and rivalry. While Khuong enthusiastically narrated her version of the romantic entanglement, OS contemplated the unexpected turn of events. She felt both puzzled and exhausted by the situation. OS realized that her initial assessment of the antagonist might have been wrong. Back in another location, someone continued to sneeze repeatedly, prompting concerned inquiries about potential cold symptoms. The person, still maintaining a cold and indifferent demeanor, showed no signs of illness. As the events unfolded, OS abruptly remembered the upcoming birthday of the Princess Khuong, who was turning 8 years old. Khuong shared a story about Kaliya manipulating a birthday gift, turning it into a live caterpillar and causing chaos at the princess's celebration. The emperor, infuriated by the incident, prohibited OS from attending any noble events. OS found herself isolated from the social circles, with Kaliya's calculated schemes responsible for her predicament. As OS reflected on her current predicament, she couldn't help but acknowledge the meticulous planning Kaliya and Khuong. The situation seemed to intensify, and OS contemplated the impending birthday celebration, wondering how Kaliya might exploit the occasion to further her schemes. Khuong harbors resentment towards her because of the incidents with Khuong in the past. Every time she retaliates, causing frustration for her. Keeping someone like that by her side is akin to holding an undercover threat. A small thorn can still cause pain when pricked. Therefore, OS is determined to deal with this woman, and the sooner the better. As the night falls in the palace of the second prince, lights are still lit everywhere. The antagonist is sitting comfortably, leaning back in a chair, enjoying tea and reading a book. Despite the victory of the crown prince in the battle, putting him at risk of exposing his conspiracy, this person seems unfazed and shows no signs of fear. Just as the tea is lifted to the lips, the crown prince suddenly appears, startling the antagonist. However, the demeanor of the crown prince is not as cheerful as usual. A chilling aura emanates from him, freezing the atmosphere. The antagonist quickly regains composure and looks at the crown prince. "Why is my brother visiting my place today?" The crown prince seems familiar with this location, and without waiting for an invitation, he boldly sits down and says, "I also came to this department, but the servant said you hadn't returned yet." The antagonist casually places the tea and the book on the table, then excitedly recounts the details as if narrating a grand story. "Apologies, brother. I had a date with Miss OS today, and it was so much fun that I almost forgot. Just by looking at me now, you can tell that I'm trying to provoke the crown prince." Denon takes the bait, raising an eyebrow skeptically and asking, "A date? Are you two already together?" Hitting the right spot, the antagonist begins to unleash a torrent of words, but today I successfully confessed to Miss OS, and she says she would consider it. Internally, the Crown Prince is screaming, wanting to elevate OS to the heavens for consideration. If she speaks the truth about liking me, I shouldn't refuse. Denon intentionally teases, "Why? Is the Crown Prince's face darker than the bottom of a pot?" The antagonist, with a mocking tone, deliberately pokes the sore spot, asking, "Why does brother look so unpleasant? Is there something interesting about OS?" Now she's considering whether she genuinely likes me. You're screaming for her to consider it. If she confesses her true feelings, shouldn't you accept them straightforwardly? Seeing the Crown Prince's face getting darker, Denon further provokes, "Why does brother seem to hope that I didn't win? I thought brother wouldn't want to talk to me if I won." The insinuations of the Crown Prince's inner turmoil successfully make the antagonist triumphant. The Crown Prince attempts to suppress his anger, taking a deep breath and asking his younger brother about the victory in the battle. But the antagonist gives a mocking reply, expressing congratulations. The Crown Prince learns that his brother expected him to win and mentions he knew that his younger brother would be victorious. Denon, appearing to regain calmness, congratulates his brother again and subtly denies any involvement in OS affairs. The antagonist, with a mysterious smile, suggests that the Crown Prince wants to imply something about OS. Even though rumors outside say that she admires the Crown Prince, they haven't been together yet, creating a fair competitive relationship between them. The antagonist believes that the Crown Prince wouldn't be selfish to the point of not allowing a fair competitor. With this, the Crown Prince's unresolved curiosity about the woman continues.